For those of you joining us today, my name's Dr. Mike Sykuta. I'm the Executive Director of the Financial Research Institute at the University of Missouri. We are happy to have you joining us for this hot topic hotline on arrearage management plans and other tools and ways of dealing with consumer debt post-COVID. We have a great panel that's been put together today, and our moderator is going to be Commissioner Cliff Rechtshaven from the California Public Utility Commission. Commissioner Rechtshaven joined the commission in 2017 and has several responsibilities around safety and emergency response proceedings, renewable portfolio standards, energy savings assistance programs. Prior to joining the California Public Utility Commission, he had a long career in various aspects of environmental law and environmental policy, and has brought that with him to his commissioner role. He is also the one who helped coordinate the topic and the speakers today. Commissioner Rechtshaven is one of our advisory board members, joined the FRI in January of 2019, and we are glad that he's with us. He will moderate the show, and we will have opportunity for questions and answers as we go through. At the bottom of your window there, you should see the Q&A button. If you have questions, please click that and submit your questions through the Q&A button, and then we will respond to those as we go through the seminar. But if you could direct your questions there, we'll get those answered as best we can. So without any further ado, and to honor our time, Commissioner Rechtshaven, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk about this very important topic. It really is a hot topic. It is something that is very much on the minds of policymakers, consumer advocates, public utilities commissioners, and otherwise. And we have an outstanding panel, and we're going to get right to it. We're going to be pretty interactive. We're going to have a series of questions and let the panelists feed on each other's comments. I will add a little bit about the California experience, but mostly be in a moderating role. We have as our panelists Michelle Scala, who is a senior energy analyst in the Strategy Integration Division at the Oregon Public Utilities Commission. Kim Ricallo, who has worked for the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, our second largest public utility in California, for over 16 years, and she's manager in the Residential and Assistance Delivery Program. And Olivia Wine, who's an attorney with the National Consumer Law Center and recently appointed to the FCC's Consumer Advisory Committee. So along with serving on boards of the National Energy and Utility Affordability Coalition. I didn't give lengthy introductions because I want to get right to it, and also start off by just asking each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and really just talk about your role in addressing COVID, the role you have in the agency and or your organization, and then we will get to some specifics. So Michelle, could we start off with you?
Sure, thanks. So my name is Michelle Scala, and as the commissioner said, I am a senior utility or energy analyst in the Strategy Integration Division at Oregon PUC. And specifically to this topic, I led the dockets that went through the commission in order to implement arrearage management plans in the 6 investor-owned utilities that we regulate. In addition to that, I was part of a pretty broad team to tackle the impacts or the economic impacts of the COVID on utility customers. And that explored things such as debt forgiveness, different sorts of bill payment options, and different ideas for relief that we might bring to our utility customers. In addition to that, I'm part of a work group that is investigating alternatives to disconnection and arrearage management plans on a more permanent basis, such as percentage of income plans. And I'm also on a community engagement work group for wildfire mitigation. And so we're also dealing with vulnerable communities there that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID.
Thank you. Kim?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. Kim Ricallo with SMUD, and it's, you know, my title says residential assistance delivery, but honestly, the main focus of my work is dealing with our income eligible customers, providing discounts to them and the eligibility for them, and what we call our EPR program, and also doing low income weatherization and electrification for those same populations. But for this specific topic, I've been on a team that's been working on kind of arrearage management and kind of strategies around that for over a year now, and continue on that team. And I am been coordinating and working with our local Sacramento Emergency Rental Assistance Program administered through SHRA. I've been coordinating with some of the cities, local cities in our area for helping them to get assistance on customers' accounts as well. And then we'll be working on the new CAP program that's just getting ready to launch as well. So definitely been in my wheelhouse for the last year and a half.
Thank you, Olivia.
Hi, and thanks for having me. Olivia Wine, staff attorney at the National Consumer Law Center. I'm on the Energy and Utilities team at the National Consumer Law Center, and we've been working on federal, state, utility level policies and programs, fighting for low-income customer assistance in various forms, and the implementation of the relief when we are successful. My colleagues and I have also intervened in numerous state proceedings to try and establish and implement arrearage management programs, percentage of income payment plans, the standard utility discount programs, just making them stronger, operate better. And with this COVID relief, you know, really keeping an eye on the spend out of the federal COVID relief dollars at this point, but also in this next infrastructure bill, still fighting for additional dollars for arrearage forgiveness. In particular, I think that is probably relevant to this discussion today.
Thank you. You can see we have an extraordinarily qualified group of experts here, and hopefully, in addition to this panel, you can use these folks as resources going forward, because there's a lot of expertise here. I wanted to start, Olivia, if you could do just a little bit of level setting and give us just a very, very brief overview of the national picture facing utility customers who incurred debt during COVID and the scale of the challenges they face as we start to emerge from the pandemic.
Yeah, these are unprecedented times in terms of unprecedented challenges and unprecedented opportunities. And that is probably an understatement. Energy insecurity has been a problem before COVID, but during COVID, the Federal Reserve just came out with their updated economic well-being of U.S. households analysis in May, but it was looking at 2020. And, you know, what they found is sort of what we probably all know in our gut, that the financial challenges in 2020 were uneven and frequently left those who entered the pandemic sort of financially unstable. They are worse off. The laid off workers had limited financial buffers during the pandemic, suffered economic declines. So we're seeing statistics like maybe more than 1 in 4 adults were either unable to pay their monthly bills or would not have been able to withstand a $400 financial setback. I'm sorry, 1/4 of adults. And then among workers who were laid off, 45% were unable to pay their bills in November fully. So what was going on in 2020? The stay-at-home requirements came down in the spring. People staying at home used more energy. Disconnection moratoria were put in place in most of the country to protect access to essential utility services during the stay-at-home period, during this economic crisis and public health crisis. An economic downturn as businesses had to close down, uneven, recovery times. So household debt was increasing. We had like a record high unemployment level last year, 14.8% in April of 2020. And we've been hovering around 6% unemployment since December. But, you know, those numbers still have been hovering there up until, you know, where we are now. NEADA, the LIHEAP directors, had estimated about 1 in 5 households being behind on their utility bills because of COVID. Their estimated amount, you know, was 32 billion in household energy debt. Indiana University researchers in their national survey found 1 in 5 households couldn't pay their energy bill or an energy bill, and nearly 15% of those households had received a shutoff notice. So what I'm just describing is just sort of, you know, an enhancement in the type of low income instability and the introduction of new households that had prior to COVID probably been able for the most part to pay their bills, but due to the pandemic and the economic upheaval suddenly found themselves in this sort of new situation, new class of newly poor. So I think it's important as we think about strategies and policies to help residential customers in economic distress, we sort of keep in mind during the outreach and education piece that there is this sub component of the residential population that is not familiar with the current sort of standard tools in the toolkit to help deal with more affordable utility bills, to help deal with arrears, the federal assistance programs out there that could be of help, and how to avail themselves of those programs. So that's an important marker out there. I'm going to just stop there because this is supposed to be brief, but I think that that's essentially where we are. I should put a pin in the opportunity because I would like to delve into this a little bit deeper. With this unprecedented pandemic and public health and economic health crisis, we saw several rounds, and we're still, you know, may see another round of federal relief coming to states and households as well as businesses. The Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program is a long-standing federal assistance program to help low-income households with their home energy needs. It's received over $9 billion in a couple of waves of regular appropriations and, you know, COVID relief packages. There is the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which is roughly around $45 billion. And Kim had mentioned, you know, working with customers to avail themselves of this assistance. It is powerful for tenants who have fallen behind on their utility bills, because depending on how the states or localities have set up their rental assistance program, this can cover up to 12 months of utility debt and, you know, several months moving forward of current utility obligations. There were 2 tranches of emergency rental assistance, but the rules are pretty similar for both. This money is available, the first tranche available until September 2022, second tranche available until September 2025. So the money is out there, but there should be a big push now for everyone eligible to be availing themselves of this assistance on the utility side, because again, it can be very powerful. There's a homeowners assistance fund.
Olivia,
Yes.
Olivia, sorry to interrupt you because you're on a roll and you're a great advocate, but let's put that aside because we'll talk about that a little later, the opportunities. I want to talk about what some of the states have done. And also, we are going to get into some issues about outreach and education, and also to the extent that these programs have gone beyond the traditional low-income customers who are usually served by these programs. But thank you for that. It's a stark picture, and the need is great. So I want to turn now to focus on some specifics and start with repayment plans. And I'm going to first ask Kim and then Michelle to talk about whether or not your agency had previous experience with debt arrearage programs and how you developed them, and just describe the basic elements. We're going to get into some more detail about the length of repayment, coverage, and outreach later, but just if you could describe the basics. So first Kim and then Michelle.
So
we have always offered our customers, no matter their income state, right, pretty flexible payment arrangements. But as part of the pandemic and the moratoriums, the amount that customers owed is significantly more. So those original payment plans that worked no longer will work. You know, when you talk about a house that's, you know, that qualifies for our income qualified program, so under 200% of federal poverty, if all of a sudden you have to add $50 or $100 to your already your existing utility bill, that's going to be pretty stressful. So we've extended those way beyond our normal, and for our customers, we're allowing up to 24 months. But honestly, right now, and I won't get into the details because I know we're going to do that down the road here, but it's really pushing them to use these assistances and get out there and make sure they're applying for these. And to Olivia's point, using different techniques to get to these customers, because a lot of these customers have never been in this situation before. So they may not know about all these programs or know to ask about these programs. So it's really connecting with them and then connecting with any of the local agencies that maybe they're affiliated with to get that word out.
Thank you, Michelle.
Hi. So in Oregon, we did not have a lot of experience at the commission with arrearage management plans prior to COVID. You know, the utilities have always offered some form of time payment arrangements, which we are seeing again with COVID, but they were usually around 3 months for some of the utilities and sometimes up to 12. And like Kim was saying, they were designed to accommodate smaller arrearages, you know, just as kind of a little snapshot or some level setting, as Kim did earlier. You know, in January of 2020, total arrears across all 6 investor-owned utilities was around 30 million. And in June, we're lower than we were in May, but it's around 90 million. So you see that that's a huge growth in the amount of dollars you're talking about trying to manage. And so traditional TPAs just weren't sufficient in our perspective. When we did decide to do the investigation into the economic impacts of COVID on utility customers, we were really going into uncharted waters, and we explored everything from deferred payment arrangements to extending TPAs, debt forgiveness in the form of instant grants that might be applied just on the basis of having received energy assistance in the previous 24 months, or a self-verification application process that a customer went through the utility. We also explored in different utilities the idea of giving them agency in terms of how they wanted to structure the program with that regulatory oversight. And so between the 6 utilities, there are definitely similarities, but they're not designed to mirror one another perfectly. And so in some instances, you might simply have grants that are, like I mentioned, debt forgiveness based, and other ones are more matching based. In some instances, we have 50-50 matches, and in one instance, we have a 40-60 match. We have extended payments, and then we also have lump sum or 3-month matches. And so there's a lot of diversity there, and we're currently in the process of evaluating for whether or not certain options work better than others, so that if we need to move forward with these and additional funds might be needed, we could perhaps narrow things down to the most effective options. In terms of outreach, briefly, you know, we've really encouraged the utilities to be creative, and we've seen them really step up to the plate with that. I'm kind of curious if we could come back at some point to the idea that both Olivia and Kim pointed out about this new class of customers finding themselves, because for us, I feel as though we're observing a widening of the gap. So even folks that are familiar with the space of needing assistance, there's still those unreachables that kind of exist within that space. And I see outreach being a little bit easier for us to get to the newly poor class that they were describing versus that widening space between the unreachables that have always existed in this space, but for some reason have trouble accessing these programs or getting successfully signed up.
Well, why don't we go to that right now and join that question. Kim, do you want to comment on the question of how to reach the unreachables, or just people in general, what kinds of tools you used, and I can pipe in a little bit, but I also want to hear from Olivia about what she's seen nationally.
Yeah, I mean, it's very true. Michelle hit it dead on that, we've always had a population of unreachables, but it does seem to have kind of widened, if you will. And I sort of touched on it when I mentioned that we're reaching out to new organizations that we've potentially not reached out to before, or not necessarily in the what we'd consider low income space, in order to get to those customers in kind of the areas or organizations that they connect with. We also did some kind of more unique things, like making sure we were at the schools as they were doing their free lunch programs and their free breakfast programs and handing out flyers and letting them know, here's all the things that can assist you, to hopefully get to them that way. But to Michelle's point, there's so many different barriers. We try to do things in different languages and those types of things, but it's really, in my mind, and what has been successful for us is really connecting with those organizations that customer trusts and goes to, or may hang out with, if you will, in order to get some of those messages out.
And to reiterate some of the challenges, I think one of the questions is, is there an over-reliance on assuming customers have access to the internet? There is a very persistent digital divide in this country, and it is happening at the same time that brick and mortar intake sites for the traditional assistance programs have been shutting down. So one of the things that we've seen is this assumption that customers will know how to upload necessary documentation. Even if they're able to access the application on their smartphone, that next step of needing to get that documentation somehow to the right entity. And in 2020, when we were in that stay-at-home phase, and those intake sites were not open, and so what we saw was like customers whose normal pathway in was blocked. So that may be part of the widening, so that you may notice, like, we traditionally reach out to our LIHEAP customers. A lot of those traditional LIHEAP customers just sort of hit that, everything, the only way to do this safely is online, and that barrier required some real sort of creative navigating. And I just want to put out a plug for those who aren't familiar. There is a federal emergency broadband benefit program, which is providing up to $50 per month per eligible low-income household for broadband, and it's substantial. It's up to $75 if you're on tribal land. And I know some states like California have their own, a complementary state assistance program. So there's programs out there, but again, helping connect the customer to the program is the challenge. So just flagging that.
Can
Go
I
ahead,
just
Kim.
make one additional comment? Because
Of course.
Olivia is right, and absolutely that federal program. So that's one of the things that we've concentrated on. And SMUD, we just did a press conference yesterday with United Way, and has invested in our local community to help with that digital divide, because you're absolutely correct. It's another one. Is one of my concerns with our local Sacramento Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and something I called out early on, is they're only doing online. You sign on, or your application is through the web. Well, to your point, we have a huge number of customers that they don't ever communicate that way. They either don't, or don't want to, or are not comfortable with. So, the comment that I got back as part of that is like, well, we needed to get it up. We needed to get it out the door quickly. And kudos to them. They were one of the first ones out of the state. And, we're already and have been receiving quite a bit of funds through that program on behalf of our customers. But I just wanted to make those comments.
This is where the navigators come into play, and utilities can be very helpful to the extent, they can contract with the community-based organizations, these trusted entities deep within the communities, to help with the education and outreach, and to help provide them with the materials that they need for the education and outreach, and to explain the processes of how you enroll in these various programs, so that they can then be sort of like the navigator, translator through this process for these families, because some of these forms can be quite long, can be quite complex, and can require a lot of documentation.
In California, in our most recent decision, we did require the utilities to work with community-based organizations to educate consumers, just as you suggested, Olivia. Let me ask you folks, what do you think about auto enrollment, and did you rely on that? And should trusted partners be allowed to do the actual enrollment as in these programs? Has anyone gone that far? So let me start with you, Michelle, and then Kim, and then Olivia.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a lot of interesting feedback about auto enrollment. We did have two options within two different utilities that had auto enrollment if you'd received energy assistance in any form in the last 24 months prior to the program rolling out. And we received a lot of positive feedback in the check-ins where customers were leaving, statements about how amazing it was to see the indicator on their bill that the balance had been paid up to the maximum amount. And at the same time, when we were talking to other utilities that opted not to do the auto enrollment, we received a lot of concern about the idea that utility customers might not be opening up their bills anymore. And would they even know that this happened, or would the money be put in, the debt be partly forgiven, and then additional arrears would accumulate because there was no trigger in behavior change? So I think from analyst perspective, I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I think there's a lot of positivity to it in terms of reducing barriers, but I think that there needs to be a big effort to make sure that the customer is somehow notified that the benefit has been awarded. And I think that we saw attempts to make really kind of obvious bill indicators and auto calls to help that go out. And I think that we're right now at a cusp of where we're going to see whether or not those customers that received those auto enrollments are going to experience additional arrears accumulating, or if it's going to have effectively brought them down to a place where they feel like they can manage the payments better and start engaging in payment behavior again.
Kim?
So there's two things that I could probably talk to on that. As far as auto enrollment and like a payment plan type thing, we've opted to not do that yet. We certainly will work with the customer and all of that. And the reasoning for that is we really want to personalize it based on what the customer can do. And we don't want to set them up for failure, so to speak. Now, granted, like I mentioned, we're doing pretty long payment plan options for those customers, but we'd prefer to get them connected with the resources first and then do that. And then as far as auto enrollment, that is the one thing with the California Arrearage payment program that the utilities really kind of fought for, is let us auto enroll, get this funds right to the customer to get them out of this. We're in a very unique situation that we've never been in before, and these customers just need that help to get out and at least get back on track. And so for that program, that will do that. There won't be an application process. Now, granted, there's a lot of reporting, and we do have to put it on the line item that credit is coming from that program on their bill. So there's some requirements there that I think are really good. But Michelle spoke on some things too that concern me with some of these programs. You need to get customers connected to some of these programs that are out there. And sometimes it's more than just the utility assistance, right? A lot of these agencies can offer other benefits for them that really help them in the long run. It can help them to maybe, with resumes or computer skills and other things. A lot of these agencies are really that 360-degree view and can help those customers get out of this long term. So I'll leave it there for now.
Kim, I just want for folks to understand, you distinguished your program from the broader California Arrearage Management Program. Could you just explain what the distinction for folks who aren't aware of that?
So the California Arrearage program is really, that was a state bill that just passed, that customers will receive, the public utilities and the investor-owned utilities will receive some assistance on behalf of these customers. There's a whole process. We have to fill out stuff, and then customers will receive some sort of benefit depending on how much each utility receives automatically as part of this program. What I described is more of a payment plan, right? You owe this after all these assistance, you owe so much, and then we're going to work with you personally to figure out what that what works for you in order to be successful with whatever's left over. Does that help?
And that's part of, yes, extremely helpful. That's part of the complex ecosystem here. We have federal programs that Olivia is talking about. California and other states have adopted state relief programs. And then we have the individual utilities providing repayment plans and other programs.
Yes.
Olivia, just anything quickly on this point about auto enrollment?
Yes. Illinois and Maryland also, and this is, maybe if we sort of divide up our problems, Illinois and Maryland and California have statewide arrearage forgiveness, sort of like a one-off debt forgiveness program. And this is the how do we get money to people quickly? And they've structured them this in similar ways. In Maryland and Illinois, the definition of who's eligible is, if you've received energy assistance in the past couple of years, so because sometimes you get it and sometimes you can't, what have you. They're trying to capture as many people as possible. You don't have to apply. It just, wipes the debt off. You also have all of this additional LIHEAP assistance. So that's another way a customer may see like a credit just appear to wipe off some debt on their bills is, we've got, like I said, over $9 billion in LIHEAP funding, which is just multiple times more than states normally get in any one year. So, they're using it in these creative ways and also to complement the state programs, the utility programs. So you've got a lot of moving pieces out there, but it's that's the most consumer friendly way to deal with like these, as we've noted during COVID, these unusually large arrearages. It's just, this is perhaps not the time to try and train somebody or to modify behavior. The goal here is to help move the country forward to recovery, to help transition folks out. And if we can wipe out these debts, education is going to be a big part of this too, moving forward. What's in place to deal with affordable bills or, debts that may accrue moving forward. That's a more sort of almost normal state of play. So I'll just make that one-stop shop is always a good idea, though.
Mike has his hand up. Just to round out the picture, separate from the California statutory change that Kim referenced, where utilities will receive this assistance in California, and Olivia mentioned this, in a decision that our commission reached in June of this year, we automatically enrolled basically all eligible residents with outstanding debt of over 60 days in a 24-month repayment program. So there's a separate program for small businesses as well, but for residents, that's our approach is auto enrollment. Mike, did you have a question?
So one of our participants has a question that doesn't quite fit the auto enrollment aspect, but relates to how utilities are being assisted in underwriting or writing off some of these debts, especially to the extent that the utilities are able to so I guess two-part question in some sense. How much of the writing off of the debts or arrearages by the utilities is a payment from the state versus allowing it to be cost recovered in rate setting? And to the extent it's allowed to be cost recovered, how does that jive with utilities then turning it over to collection agencies and the, if it's being recovered through the recovery process or if it's being funded by the state? Should that preclude the utility from turning it over to collections agencies?
Yes, but I'm not going to. I'll let Michelle. Maybe Michelle can take an answer since she regulates private utilities. Kim's in a little bit of a different situation. Cost recovery is certainly an issue for private utilities. Michelle, do you want to take a crack at that question?
Yeah, I'll do my best. So I don't know pre-COVID what the full process was, as far as I know that the utilities will report bad debt to the commission at a certain level, and they, in their rate case, will have been afforded a certain amount that they can recover through rates. And with that in mind, I don't know the answer to whether those debts are then turned around and sent to collection agencies. But I will say that in the pandemic, part of our stipulation with the utilities was that the debt that accumulates should not be reported to any kind of credit agencies or sent to collections. And I think that that's pretty profound, because I just had my own personal experience where I thought that one of my cards was on auto pay and it wasn't. And I think I missed 1 month's of payment and it got reported. And it ended up, I think, like dropping my credit score, like 20 to 40 points or something, just for like 1 month of a innocent mistake. And I think about what would happen to people who already might be struggling with bad credit, getting those reported, and what that means for them, and how that's going to affect their ability to borrow money and the kinds of rates. And, you know, to kind of go off on a tangent here, the idea of making the poor poorer. But to circle back to the original question, I think that in at least the scope of the impacts of COVID, we're telling the utilities to defer all of the debt and the costs associated with the bad debt for us to revisit in the following year in terms of what kind of recovery they can get through the deferrals, rather than sending it to collection agencies.
Could I just jump in for a couple of points to build
Yes.
on what Michelle was saying about the dangers or the harms of the negative credit reporting? It also affects people's ability to get jobs and housing. So, I mean, there's a ripple effect out there that's profound. The harm should not be underestimated. To go back to how we pay for this COVID relief, the sources of funding have varied throughout 2020. Initially, you know, in 2 states, Minnesota and Michigan, there were some shareholder funds kicked in. In Illinois, there was also a settlement with the large utilities and the water utilities, where you know, they provided the arrearage forgiveness, like, you know, a couple $100 per customer for arrearage forgiveness, and that, you know, was going to be tracked and then, you know, dealt with, I believe, in a rate case in the near future. And then as I mentioned, there's been all of this federal relief money out there. And so I think, you know, perhaps some of the dynamics in play, perhaps in the California legislature, in Illinois with the governor's office and his executive order, in Maryland through the governor and the legislature, the substantial COVID relief for low-income customers could have come from, you know, one of these pots of federal dollars, or a combination of them. But, you know, states and localities received $350 billion last year in flexible COVID relief. And, you know, the Treasury guidance was explicit that this could be used to provide household relief from economic distress stemming from COVID. The LIHEAP funds too, sort of tacking on, you know, some CARES LIHEAP funds that may expire this September, by September 30th, if unspent. So, you know, there are funds out there that you could sort of package together to deal with utility debt, certainly on the energy side. And that could be what we're seeing out there. It's just a mix and match of all of the above. It's all in play in the different states.
I think that's right. I can speak from California's perspective, where we're looking at all the various sources, and we'll sort things out depending on how much we get from the federal government, state government, and otherwise. And the cost recovery issue is an important one. The scale of to the extent we're doing loan forgiveness, debt forgiveness, or other things, the scale is such that the cost will have to be socialized, I think. But we'll have to see how that goes. I want to make sure to touch on one important issue in the evolution of these programs, which is the scope of the consumers who should be targeted. And we've talked about this already, and all the new people who are now suddenly in great need of assistance. Michelle, the Oregon PUC started out rolling with addressing a broader consumer base rather than just focusing on the most vulnerable. And I'm wondering if you could describe your approach there, and then we can hear from others as well.
Sure, thank you. So I came in a little bit after when the stipulations were first being drafted, but right away, the big initial push was that this is COVID relief. This isn't additional low-income assistance. And that kind of colored a lot of the analysis and the approach and the decisions that were made early on. And although points were frequently brought up about disproportionate impact to certain types of communities, at the end of the day, it would return to that initial point of, hey, this is COVID relief. We don't want to be differential based on low income because we already have low income programs out there. But I think, we were all very conscious of the realities that were becoming more and more apparent as the investigation went on. And so initially, while the programs were designed to basically be allowed for anyone that has experienced financial hardship due to COVID and is in arrears, I think now we're really seeing that if we could do it again, maybe it really should have been targeted in the onset, because the funds, we looked at 1% of 2019 Oregon revenues, retail revenues, and it's been so hard to chip away at this massive debt. And as Olivia pointed out earlier, some folks are experiencing economic recovery sooner than others. And so, was it the most prudent choice? We wanted to act quickly, and I'm not discounting any of the amazing efforts that our team put forth. But I think with the limited resource and the way that we're looking at socializing these costs over the next year or so, perhaps a more targeted approach to those more at-risk communities would have helped at least make a bigger difference in the folks that are still unable to pay now versus the folks that are now coming into funds that they can use to pay their utilities. And so when we look at some of the programs that target EA folks, or when we look at the idea of, are we going to extend these funds? Are we going to protect folks from disconnection, which was a recent docket that we put through that hopefully we can talk about later. We are looking more at specific customer characteristics and making sure that we take the limited funds we have and funneling them to where they're most needed at this point.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've been looking at for almost since the beginning, right? It's more than just our low income population that needs the assistance. What can we do in this space? Our regular residential customers, we know some of them have struggled as well and may not qualify for some of the programs, right? Because the programs are pretty income restrictive that could do it. And the other area, especially in our local region, is our small, medium businesses. They were hit really hard, right? They're struggling bad to get back on their feet. So what can we do? So we've looked at some different programs and how we could apply them to each of those customer bases. And then with the California Arrearage payment program, that was the other one where we were really trying to influence them to say, let's not just keep this program to our income qualified customers. Let's go outside that scope, right? Let's look at our residential customers and our commercial customers as well. That funding is prioritized, right, based on how you can do it, but it's not restricted to just our low income customers. So I think it's definitely been on our scope and our radar to do those things. Again, we're kind of figuring out exactly what assistance is going to land where, and then we'll be doing something probably creative for each of those bases. The other thing, it kind of doesn't fit in with all of these things that we've been talking about, but I want to share is part of our process through all of this. The other thing that we looked at is our income qualified customers. We'd actually identified, most of you out there have probably heard of energy burden or electric bill burden, right? And it's really the relationship of how much the customer has to pay for their energy as opposed to their income. Well, we identified that, yeah, we had we're looking at the energy burden and we're trying to reduce that. And for us, it's an electric bill burden because we're an electric only. We'd identified that really for our income qualified customers, we're creating this almost hidden energy burden with late fees, disconnection fees, reconnection fees, and all of that. As part of our process, we've eliminated all of those going forward. So when we start disconnections again, which won't be till next year, we've pushed ours off till 2022, those will no longer exist for our income qualified customers.
Thank you. Olivia, quickly, because we want to get to some other topics. Nationally, of most programs that you're aware of, have they been more targeted to very low income
Yeah.
customers or broader?
They've been targeted for two reasons. One, to stretch the scarce resources as far as possible to a group that, you know, is likely to be hardest hit and slowest to bounce back. The other is sort of administrative efficiency, right? Having people like prove how poor they are to qualify for something is burdensome for consumers as well as whoever has to go through the documentation and make a determination. So to the extent you can rely on low-income home energy assistance participation or participation in a low-income discount program or, you know, other proxies where a household has already sort of been identified as low income, you know, that just makes it easier to get the money out because you have a set defined population that you know that you need to target and pathways to them.
Mike, I can't see that. I understand there's a question, but I don't think I can see it.
Okay,
Maybe I can.
but I'll be
Okay,
happy.
I can see it. It's a question about, to the extent some investor-owned utilities claim that denying them full recovery of arrearages would be a taking, and that any shareholder contribution would require a taking. Do any of the panelists want to answer that?
The Minnesota and Michigan example I provided, those were voluntary. So those were not mandated in terms of shareholder contribution.
I think I don't have I don't know the answer that. I'm sure the lawyers in the different utility commissions will work through that. I haven't seen an analysis. I don't know, Michelle, if you have any further thoughts about that.
Like you mentioned, I can take the question back to one of our attorneys, and I can get back to Brian on that if he wants to leave his contact information. I haven't heard any of those types of arguments in our discussions with the utilities. I do know that they would like a swift prudence review when it comes to looking at the deferrals that we authorize through the stipulation. But I think that the stipulation might afford us some protections from this sort of thing because we got all of the utilities to sign on to it. So they know, at least at this point and in this shape and form, what sort of things the commission is going to be looking at for deferrals.
Michelle, there's a question for you to provide a little bit more details of your AMP program. How many customers, over how many months the customer stays in the program? Is there a maximum amount per month or per year that will be written off? And is there some estimate of how many customers are enrolled in Oregon? So again, how many months do you stay in? Is there a maximum amount that will be written off? Is there some estimate of how many customers are enrolled?
Sure. Olivia, I think this is one of your colleagues. I recognize his name from some of the reports that we've read. You know, this might take a little bit more time that I know we don't have. I would love to connect with Charles later, if that's okay. But I will say that we have a lot of diversity in the arrearage management programs. We do have a few 12-month extended payment arrangements where the utility will match the customer payment. And that can be spread over kind of like a levelized idea to help them know how much it's going to add to their existing utility bill. We have some that are going to be like immediate. If you can pay 40% of your arrearage balance right now, then the utility will match 60% as soon as that payment goes through. We did have some advocates ask for 24-month programs, but I think the way that we looked at approving them going forward, it was designed to be 12 months so that they could kind of get ahead of it a little bit sooner than later. And then just really quickly, because I wanted to bring up this point about having limited resources, you know, something that we looked at a lot at Oregon PUC was the idea that we have these limited funds and we have so many different customers in debt. And basically each utility was only afforded the 1% of 2019 Oregon retail revenue. So in terms of Charles' questions about how many people can enroll, well, it's basically until all of those funds are committed within each utility service territory. And we wanted to make sure that the programs didn't focus too much on getting to so many people that the funds were spread so thin they couldn't make a meaningful difference. And so you'll see different maximum benefit amounts ranging from 1,500 to 250. But our main thing was that if the money is going to help an arrearage, we want it to be meaningful and prevent arrearages from reaccumulating rather than just kind of sprinkling a little bit of money on every possible person.
I want to talk about, in the time we have remaining, programs that go just beyond repayment of debt, debt forgiveness payment as a percentage of income. It's a logical following from where we are and all the points that our panelists have made about what we've seen in terms of the scale of COVID. I should just in answering your question, Charles, we can follow up about California, which you're probably familiar with, but in addition to our repayment program, we last year adopted a program for our lowest income customers to provide for debt forgiveness over a 12-month period if they promptly pay their current bills for 12 months. 1/12 of their debt, up to $8,000, is forgiven for each month that they stay current on their current bills. But that's our program, again, limited to our low-income subsidized customers. So programs beyond repayment, debt forgiveness. Kim, Michelle, Olivia, can you comment about programs that you've worked on, seen in other states?
I'll jump in then. If we look at energy affordability, there is the ongoing obligation, and can that household afford that ongoing obligation? And then there's the what happens when the answer is no, they can't afford it. Then you have to have a program to deal with the debt in a way that's, sustainable for the household, where they're not on a treadmill of like always falling off again. And that's where the arrearage management programs come in. It's sort of that pathway out of debt through regular payments. How we get the current obligation as affordable as possible, we have been pushing for percentage of income payment plan programs where a customer's bill is determined as a percentage of their income. So whereas a wealthy household may pay 2% to 4% perhaps of their income on energy, depending on, the profile of the household, a low-income household's energy burden is much, much higher. And it's sort of a PIP is trying to get that percentage more in alignment with the non-low-income population. Anywhere from perhaps 2.5% of income to, 4% to 6% of income for energy bills. That's the basic concept there.
Michelle, thank you. Can you talk about one that was initiated by Avista, a program initiated by Avista?
Yeah, so, going forward, we're really trying to get ahead of this problem that folks are constantly falling into arrears. We've done a lot of looks into, cyclical arrearage behavior. And, we always see drops in June because people are catching up with winter heating. And I think that Avista has really been at least a trailblazer in our region about looking at permanent programs for these types of problems. Now they piloted both a PIP payment or percentage of income payment plan and an arrearage management plan in Washington. And in Oregon, we haven't seen the PIP from them yet, but they said that they do plan on putting it forth in the future. And we recently just approved their permanent arrearage management plan that is, I feel, very creative, because one of the issues that they've seen is their LIRAP funds, which is basically that utilities LIHEAP. It constantly has carryover balances. And, that's always a shame, because we know that there are people in debt. We know that there are people that need assistance, but it's just an issue of getting it out to them. And so they felt that this might be an additional way that could be authorized spending for the funds. And basically, it's if the customer signs up and is eligible, they pay 10% and the utility will cover 90. And that's over a 12-month period, and it's levelized, and they can participate up to 2 times in a 7-year period. And this is really just a way to help customers not only feel successful at being able to manage their bills, but utilize funds that the utility has available to them without unduly burdening other customers in the socializations of these kinds of costs. We also have a House Bill 4067 that was recently passed, and this is allowing us to look at differential rates when we go into rate making cases. So, taking into account income levels and the issue that Olivia described about energy burden being so much higher for certain populations. Anything higher than 6% is considered energy burden. And like Olivia mentioned, sometimes you'll see 20, 40%. I mean, can you imagine paying 40% of your income just on utilities? And so we're going to go into an exploration of how we can do prudent rate making that is fair across all customer classes, but takes into account this equity lens, and that some folks might need more assistance than others, especially when it comes to rate making.
A very interesting bill. Kim, did you have any comments on this question?
I'll just make it quick. I just want to add on to Michelle's comment. That's what's, we went back and we call it our EPR strategy, or energy assistance program rate strategy. And that's exactly what we were looking at, is that kind of affordability and the energy and electric bill burdens, and how that varied across the customers that we provide a discount for. So we changed our discount structure. So those in the 0 to 50% federal poverty level actually get a larger discount, and those in the 150 to 200% actually get a smaller discount. So we have basically 4 discount amounts that go from the largest to the smallest, to try to address some of that. And then our weatherization and what we call our energy saver bundles, we've been targeting based on energy burden as well, and that federal poverty level, to try and go after those customers that need that help the most in changing their burden and trying to reduce that for them. And I'll just leave it at that for now, and because I know we're getting short on time.
We do. In California, we have an affordability proceeding looking at the bundle of utility bills and how to try to make them more affordable, because people, of course, don't segment by telco or water or energy. So we have about 2 minutes left. I'm going to do a lightning round of 30 seconds each, starting with you, Kim. Lessons learned from the challenges we faced and going forward.
Oh my gosh, data. Being able to get to that data and get to it quickly, and be able to identify where the need is, and be able to react to that quickly. I think the remote work challenges have taught us a lot as well. And the one kind of shining thing out of this is connecting with customers when they're not in a payment problem, and letting them know how to save and reduce their energy bills now, and before they have those large bills, were some kind of takeaways for us.
Michelle.
I'd agree with Kim. Data has been paramount in our analysis, and we're getting so much transparency, and it's been so valuable to both staff and stakeholders in making prudent decisions and identifying who we really need to target and help, which brings us to our next lesson learned. I really feel like we need to constantly be applying an equity lens to everything we do, and realize that we're in this, I want to steal what Olivia said earlier, but this opportunity, infusion, and I don't want to miss it. And so we're recognizing that there are folks out there that need more than others, and we're finally being equipped with the resources and the appetite to do so. I'm just going to make a quick plug. A lot of times I hear arguments that, PIPs are going to, eliminate price signals, and they're not going to be effective in terms of conservation. But let's all remember that low income usage is relatively inelastic in terms of changing with those price signals. And I think that it's important to really explore these options and not kind of fall into those blackboard economic arguments when we're trying to be a little bit more creative. It's a new time, we're new people, and we need to kind of move forward with more strategic endeavors in arrearage management and debt forgiveness and energy burden.
Thank you. Olivia, you will have the final 30 seconds.
Plus oneing my co-panelists. They're fantastic. Those were excellent lessons learned. Also want to drill a little bit deeper with the data. It needs to be regularly collected to be most helpful, and granular. Data down to the zip code level really will help you identify the pockets of pain, the persistent pockets of poverty, the persistent areas that are underserved and overburdened, and as we're developing programs and as we're measuring the success of the programs, that data will help inform like how well those programs are designed and how to tweak them.
Well, I want to thank all of you for fantastic insights. This has been a wonderful, highly educational panel. Thank you so much for your participation. Back to you, Mike.
I want to echo what Commissioner Rex Chafin said. This has been fantastic. And thank you, Olivia, Michelle, and Kim for helping us out today. Thank you, Commissioner, for your excellent moderation and getting the train in on time with a lot of material covered. We greatly appreciate your participation with FRI and helping pull this program together. For our attendees, just want to let you know, we do have a couple of other hot topic hotlines in the works. One on a rather different topic in terms of utility fiber investment, and another one coming back to some rate setting issues. We also have our fall symposium on September 22, which will be both in person and have a hybrid online option for those who can't make it, to kind of look at where we are across the regulated utilities versus where we thought we would be at this time in history and where we think things are going in the future. So I invite you to check out fri.missouri.edu and look at our programs pages there. Thank you all again for your attendance. Thank you to our panelists for your participation. You were fantastic, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.